Next is the roll call.
Mr. Gillespie?
Here, thank you.
Mr. Holloway?
Here.
Mr. Meza? Mr. Seeloff?
Here.
Mr. T-Wall?
Here.
Ms. Thompson? Here. Mayor Teacher?
Here.
Mr. Carter?
Here.
Mr. Cox?
Aye. Here.
Ms. Lavis? Here. Mr. Sayer?
Here.
And Mr. Murray?
Here. Next is the approval of the town council and board of supervisors joint meeting minutes of August the 13th, 2019.
Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? It's approved. Next is the EDA presentation.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, Ed Daly is going to introduce speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, the town council. We thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight to present to you. The EDA has been very busy the last 6 months, and we have lots of things to talk about. And I would like to first ask our Vice Chair, Mr. Jeffrey Brown, who chairs our Communications Committee, to discuss some of the things that the board's doing and our part of it. And then we will ask Mr. Parsons to present some of our materials on our loans and projects, specifically where they are.
Thank you. Everyone at this table recognizes the importance of having a vibrant economic development effort, one that brings in business, industry, interested in relocating, and helps existing businesses expand and encourage entrepreneurship. Economic development that builds community, promotes good-paying jobs, builds the tax base, and protects our natural wonders. And the handout that you have, the very first handout is our current mission and vision statement, and then a draft of a proposed statement of mission and vision for your review. We look forward to working with you to sharpen our focus and to work on our core mission, which is what our focus is as well. We're here tonight because there was a catastrophic failure that allowed criminal embezzlement and rampant mismanagement to flourish. None of us ever want to see that happen again. The failures, at least in my mind, can be grouped into two categories: failed procedures, failed oversight. First, effective procedures.
Excuse me, point of privilege, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Brown, can you use that mic? Is that mic hot?
Is this on?
Yeah, it's good, it's on.
Does this do it?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I thought, I am so loud, I can't imagine. But I'm happy
Sorry,
to.
I apologize to interrupt you.
No problem at all. EDA did its own accounting, wrote its own checks that involved multiple bank accounts worth millions. Never again. Doug Parsons is going to get into the details, but already the county board has moved all check writing into the county government. We don't have checks. That's a start, but that's not enough. On its own, since the scandal broke in March, EDA has passed procedural reforms that increase transparency and accountability. We look forward to working with this committee and the Reform Committee to review what we've done and adopt additional procedures that will prevent future embezzlement and mismanagement. Second, effective oversight. Whatever form the EDA takes into the future, there has to be effective oversight by the county board, city council, and our citizens and media. Right now, the EDA board is the first line of oversight, but not the only one. We welcome and encourage involvement by the town, county, and citizens. Attend meetings, ask probing questions, make sure they're fully answered. Trust, but verify. Reforming EDA shouldn't be the only goal of this committee. In chaos, there's great opportunity. The town and county have an opportunity to bury old disagreements that hinder economic development and work together for a shared future. We have the opportunity to speak with one voice and to present an irresistible opportunity for businesses looking for what's already here, and it's a lot. This is a new EDA board. It's active and it's looking to turn EDA around. We understand the importance of working with the town and county for the same goal, making our county better and stronger, safeguarding taxpayer monies. We're here to work. As a final comment, at the end of the day, we all want a strong economic development effort and procedures that protect citizen resources. We asked this joint committee to appoint a member of the EDA board to the EDA Reform Committee so that we can work with them as well. We have a lot to offer. With that, I'll turn it over to Doug Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you here this evening. I'd like to share with you some of the progress that we've made over the last few months. I was told about this. I forgot to turn the mute button on. All right. And is this thing on? We're good? Okay. All right. So yeah, I just wanted to share with you some of the progress that we've made over the last few months on our internal operations and answering any questions that you might have. I know that our financial, our fiscal procedures and policies is of paramount concern to everyone here tonight, so I want to start with that. We've revised our financial processes and we've developed and adopted financial best practices, and we fully transitioned to the fiscal agency agreement through the county Board of Supervisors. I want to just go through the process so that everyone here will understand how we're paying our bills, making our deposits, so that there's no doubt about how we're handling our money. On expenses, when we receive a bill, we code it. We get the signature of 2 EDA board members, the chair, the vice chair, and/or the treasurer. We have the bills to the county finance department by the 5th of each month. County Finance Department enters them into their system and reviews them. Then once they're approved by the County Finance Department, they go to the Board of Supervisors for their review. Then and only then are checks cut and mailed out. The WCEDA will record expenses and deposits, keep track of all of our finances and QuickBooks at our office, which we can then reconcile with the Board of Supervisors records, offering another layer of accountability. Our deposits, we will bring the coded checks to the treasurer's office for deposit. The county makes the deposit into the appropriate account. And then again, we continue to keep records in QuickBooks. Regarding the disposition of properties, in selling properties, we've identified properties that aren't appropriate for the EDA's mission. We are aggressively marketing those properties to get them off our books. We value our properties by looking at a variety of methods, including recent appraisals, tax assessments, and in certain cases, we will offer clients a custom pro forma or ROI to help them evaluate the marketability and the cash flow for the properties we're trying to sell. We have new committees within our board. Our board is engaged and focused on the issues. Our committees are researching, reviewing, and reporting on, again, best practices and the issues that face our group. We have an asset committee, which will review properties and valuations and advise the full board on buying and selling. And that will include offers that we get on our properties. They'll be the first to see these offers and to analyze them. Finance and loans. This committee will review our internal finances and set criteria for new USDA loans once we begin making those at some point in the future. They will also review loan applications. We have a communications committee that has already drafted a communications plan and we will be working soon on website revisions. And we'll be working with the town and county officials to work together on these projects. The executive committee, made up of the chair and the vice chair, will help to set the agendas each month and handle administrative issues. Microloans, we have developed and implemented a process to deal with delinquent loan clients. All of our delinquent loan clients have been addressed. The process is they get a phone call, that doesn't get anything, they get a letter outlining the terms of the loan and how much they're behind. That doesn't get any traction, then they get a warrant in debt and an interrogatory. When we arrived, 50% of our loan portfolio was behind on repayments. In 3.5 months, we brought it up to now 74% of our microloans are up to date on their payments or are participating in a payment plan, a signed payment plan to get caught up. 4 are in delinquency, and we have 4 in legal collections. The Front Royal Police Department, we've worked with Pannoni Engineers, and we have an update that the punch list items for the project are supposed to be done in September. The DEQ will have to sign off on a final review and approval. It's my understanding the contractor has been given until September 20th to complete the punch list items on that project and complete all the efforts. Under business retention and expansion, as an EDA, this is our #1 priority. We have met with many of our major employers to help them address their challenges and assist them with expansion opportunities. And I can tell you that of the ones I've met with so far, several have identified future expansion opportunities, and we're working with them to make sure that they have all the resources available to them here locally and on the state level at the table. Marketing, new prospects, we have had several interested parties in the 4 properties we currently have for sale. We're working with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership to increase the competitiveness of our sites to win more projects. We are rapidly expanding our network with brokers and developers, and that has borne fruit with leads from those groups. We're focusing on being more efficient, more effective, and more aggressive in winning projects. We have a variety of handouts here that show our cash balances, our loans, the interest rate, the principal balance on the loans. We have a list of our properties, our microloans. We also have some documentation on the Front Royal Police Department that shows the total requisitions submitted to date. We are expecting more requisitions on that project, so we're not able to give a principal payoff yet because the project's not quite done. And then we also have this sheet which shows every transaction in the Front Royal Police Department project, principal and interest, and dates. So you can see for yourself where we're at with that project. With that, I'll field any questions you may have.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, to summarize this, we have been working to become more transparent, make sure that at our meetings people can know what we are doing, trying to put more things out there on the table. Second, trying to change all of our finances so that they go through the county and there is no money, period, out at the EDA. Third, we want to concentrate on the basic EDA functions and facilitate projects rather than administer them. And the questions that we all have regarding the police department is an example of that. The EDA should help to facilitate that rather than be administrative. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the EDA? Does anybody on the panel have questions for the EDA, any member of the EDA and what was presented?
Mr. Chairman, if I could request, Ms. Daly, would you like to introduce your board? I think that'd be nice to do, or have them introduce themselves to the group.
Well, which way would you? I am Ed Daly. I'm the chair of the board. Jeff Brown, who is Chair of the Communications Committee, Vice Chair. Ray Blanton, he and Dr. Tom Patterson, probably our two longest members, closely aligned with Mr. Mark Baker, and Jory Martin is over here. And Greg Harold is down here at the end. He's one of our newer members. It's a newer board. There was no one here who's been here longer than 2 years. So we're all catching up on what occurred over a long period of time and how to correct it.
Thank you, Mr. Daly.
Thank you.
I do have one question, and the question is out in the public and being asked constantly. How do we stand financially? Are we solvent, not solvent? How do we stand at this moment? If we can recapitulate the finances, it might be real quick and simple to give just a couple numbers.
What kind of numbers, which numbers would you like?
Whether we are solvent or insolvent.
Currently, we have the ability to meet our debt service and our operational expenses. We have $1,871,452.28 in our cash accounts. That's as of last Thursday. Our total debt is in the neighborhood of $40 million. And if you look on, for those of you who are interested, you'll see all of our debts on these sheets right now. Right now, we're able to meet our obligations. We need to sell some properties. We need some settlement money from the civil suit. If we get that, we can extend the period of time that we are going to be solvent. There will come a point in time, however, when we may run into a wall and we may not be able to meet our principal and interest obligations, our debt service. Our finance committee is going to be taking a look at this in depth over the next few weeks to see how we can handle this and what needs to happen for us to remain solvent over the long term. But in the short term, we're okay. Long term, we're going to need some things to happen.
Someone told me, Mr. Chairman, initially that the problem at the EDA was that funding was in a variety of pots. And it was hard to separate because funds had been commingled. We have spent the last about 9 months now working to have that all separated and detailed for us. We are close, we believe, September the 10th. We will be able, our finance committee will be able to present the proposed items needed in order to get our audit completed for 18. But that does not change the fact that long-term we are not sustainable in our current condition. That is why we need to become a basic EDA and not into so many other projects.
All right.
Dr. Bailey, if I can add on to that, if you don't mind, sir, just for the public's sake, unraveling these accounts has been an absolute chore. When you're dealing with accounts that are years, maybe even decades old, that are intertwined and that may have some anomalies to them, they can't be turned around in just a matter of months. You just can't journal entry out items. You have to understand the logic behind the transaction. And I know that there's frustration with these boards. I know that there's frustration with the community in understanding this, but there is a process that has to go through to make sure that we're untangling the money and we understand exactly where it is. So this board has, as Dr. Daly has indicated, has been really diligent in trying to do that with 2 accountants on our staff, another outside auditing firm working on that. But when it runs so deep, there is a tremendous amount to understand and to untangle in order to get to the correct bottom line. That's all I had on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions or comments? DEDA.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll start with a comment. I just I just wanted to go on the record, and I said this at the last joint meeting. I truly want to thank the EDA board members. You know, I think people sometimes forget you're volunteering your time to serve your community. And I, for one, I know council, I'm sure I speak for the Board of Supervisors, we don't look at that as a small task. And couple that with the fact of the turmoil that we find ourselves in, and that I think somebody used the catastrophic event. It's a very good choice of words. So we understand, we recognize what you're going through. I think, of course, no one wants to get it resolved probably quicker than you. So I know the community cares deeply, and I know the town council does as well. But so I just wanted to go on the record and to thank you for that. I'm encouraged with the reports I'm getting from the reform committee that they're going through a process. I think the first meeting was, was just more administrative and trying to get things understood. I think there's some action items here. I, for one, don't have any particular questions. I think some of the questions may be in these reports. I didn't know if you were going to go into any you don't plan to go into details of these tonight, do you? They're for informational purposes for us to look at.
We were not doing detailed tonight, sir, but we would be pleased to entertain any questions that any of you have on any of those. When you get a chance to sit down and look at them, please call us.
Yeah, you've been very responsive, so thank you for that. Staff, Doug, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask at this meeting?
Not at this time. I'd like to digest it first.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, same here. I'd like to review the material and pass it on to the Director of Finance as well. Okay.
Great. Any council members have any particular questions?
Mr. Mayor, I do have a question, but I'll ask later to Mr. Dan Barry because it doesn't relate to the EDA directly.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'm so sorry to interrupt. If we could just remind everyone to make sure when you speak this evening to make sure you have a mic. It may be easy to hear in this room, but we may not collect you on the videos. And that's very important because we do get a lot of views, and so many in the community are so entangled in what you're saying, and we want to make sure that what's going on this evening, that those in the community hear what you're saying. So if you could remember to have a mic when you speak before we go further, I appreciate it. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, Ms. Berry.
Does she have a mic?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if we could step back to the EDA presentation for just a moment. There have been some questions posed by some constituents of mine that I think that the EDA could address, and I don't see another item on the agenda where we could turn back into that. If there's any objection to that, I would like to go ahead and ask these questions.
Please.
Okay, I'm going to be reading off my telephone, so please bear with me. For the EDA, Mr. Parsons, Mr. Brown, Dr. Daly, why do we need an EDA, and how is it going to serve the public?
Did you repeat that?
Why do we need an EDA? Why does the community need an EDA, and how does it best serve the public?
We need the EDA to coordinate and focus our efforts on economic development, recruitment, business support, and to provide new jobs here rather than elsewhere. We also are a mechanism created through the state to allow us to issue financing on behalf of private business and state and local government.
Could I elaborate? I mean, the reality is that Virginia is rated #1 for being a business-friendly state in the entire country. We have EDAs in counties and cities throughout the entire Commonwealth. They're all trying to go to do the same things that we're trying to do. And you have to have an effort that is focused and able to both work with businesses that might be coming in and expand the current one. You also have to have, in any negotiation, a lot of the firms that we're talking with request non-disclosure agreements. They don't want to have people coming in and bothering them with questions. They're asked for secrecy so that they can negotiate with a variety of our competitors and us to do it. So you have to have some sort of a mechanism in a group that has some ability to maintain secrecy and privacy in this process. So how I would answer the question is that they're both practical reasons for why we do it. There are many forms that EDAs come in, and these are issues that the Reform Committee is going to be taking a look at. But the one we have is the most common in the Commonwealth, and probably because it works well. What we have here, or had here, is an EDA that didn't work well. But it's kind of like having an ingrown toenail and thinking you ought to be pulling off all your toenails because that one didn't work. And you have to reform and get it back to normal, and then you have a pretty good product. And that's what we expect to be showing both the county and the town in the coming months.
So thank you, Jeff. I wanted to address my constituents that asked that question. There are over 2,500 sites in Virginia that are competing for business opportunities. Anywhere from Richmond, Norfolk area, the Tidewater area, Southern Virginia, the Northern Valley. Northern Virginia has their own complete animal altogether, which is enormous. But don't forget, this region that we are in right now is not only competing with Virginia localities, we're competing with West Virginia, and we are competing with Pennsylvania. And you can be sure that those states and those regions that are on the border have their own economic development authorities, which are trying to woo companies across the border where they're competing for the same industries that we are courting here today as well. So it's not just a state issue, it is a border issue with adjoining states as well. And then I guess the final question that I had from my constituents is we understand where the lapses are in the past EDA board, and I believe that Dr. Daly and Mr. Parsons properly addressed those and the systems that we're developing. How do we prevent another workforce housing from occurring when the town council brings up issues? Or how do we prevent an IT federal from occurring with this organization? What are we implementing, and what are we instilling in this board? What processes and procedures are being developed to make sure that this doesn't happen?
I think I can speak to that a little bit. When you get a client and it looks like it's serious, that it may work for a property or a building, you have to research that client. There's plenty of resources out there through the State Economic Development Office or online to do research, whether it's a credit check, a background check, a defense contractor or a federal contractor. There are databases out there that you can see, do they really have a federal contract or not? Do they really have the book of business they say they do? So it's just a matter of taking the time and doing the homework and doing the due diligence on each client to understand whether they're viable or not, or that they're who they say they are. So we have a lot of partners in Richmond. A lot of the, oddly enough, even the community colleges have very well developed research divisions and universities. You can use them to do research on companies. There's a variety of things you can do in that regard to make sure that something like IT Federal doesn't happen again. As far as housing, workforce housing goes, the code is clear that local development authorities are not supposed to be involved in residential housing. I think there are other groups out there that can better facilitate workforce housing projects. I think they're just more geared, it's part of their mission. It's really not part of a local economic development authority's mission to get into housing. There's a lot of different development authorities across the country, and they have a very wide variety of tasks and duties that they undertake depending on the community that they're in. But you won't find very many that get into housing, and I don't think that we should here. I think there are other entities that can do that for us.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons, and one final comment or question on that. Maybe you could explain to the public and all the members of the board here how the Virginia Economic Development Partnership actually works and pre-screens clients for our sites, so it enables us to deal with specifically qualified individuals that are coming into this locality, because I have a feeling there's probably a lot of people out here that don't understand or know about that process.
Well, scandals in economic development organizations are not just exclusive to Warren County. And a few years ago, the state actually had a stinker of a project. It was a company that promised to open a location in Lunenburg, I believe it is, in Virginia. And the state gave this company $1 million up front to get their project going in that county. The company was from China. They took the $1 million and ran, and were never seen or heard from again. So the state learned a lesson there, and they do a great deal of due diligence through their research department to make sure that people are real before they give them any money. The state has also gotten away from giving cash incentives up front to projects, and instead they're focusing more on what's called performance-based incentives. So if I'm a company and I'm going to come to the state of Virginia and I promise to hire 150 people and have $10 million of capital investment in real estate and equipment, the state will say, well, that sounds great. We'd love to have you here and we'll incentivize your project, but you're going to have to perform before you get the incentive. The program I ran when I was at the state for Northern Virginia was the Virginia Jobs Investment Program. And the way that worked is we would have a commitment toward the client that we'll give you somewhere between $500 and $1,000 per net new employee you hire. But you got to hire them first, and they got to be on board with your company for 90 days before you can submit that employee for reimbursement. By the time that 90 days is up, that employee and the company have paid enough payroll taxes that it usually is more than the incentive that they're getting. So they're in business, they're operating, they've paid taxes for 90 days, and then they're getting a rebate or a reimbursement of a fraction of what they've paid. And then, of course, going on in time, those employees and those companies, everything else is gravy on top. So Commonwealth Opportunity Fund is one of the most widely used incentives of the state. You have to have 50 new employees and $5 million of capital investment. So what the state does there is they develop a schedule over time where they will measure your performance and make sure that you're doing what you said you would do per the ramp-up schedule for that project. If you're on target, you get a chunk of money, and if you're not, you don't. So there's been a lot of lessons learned on the state level as well as on the local level. When the State Development Office gets a client, oftentimes that client is looking at several states or even several countries. And so we find out they find out from the client what it is they're looking for, and that's how they match up the sites and buildings that they put in front of the client. So for instance, if they need a building between 50 and 100,000 square feet on at least 10 acres, our Ball Drive property is going to pop up in the database at 76,800 square feet on 13 acres, and that's going to get presented to the client. When the client down selects to a single state, that's when the intra-state competition begins with other communities. And we work hard to offer local incentives to match the state incentives, and we start competing with our neighbors. So that's just kind of a little bit of an insight into the state's process.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Thank you, I'm finished.
I wanted to give an example of something that I would hope wouldn't happen in the future, and that is on Main Street, there was a bakery being constructed. And I heard, this was about 3 years ago, and I heard how it was going to be this bakery, and they were going to bake all these breads and things of that nature. It was just a couple doors down from my office at the time. There was a gentleman who had a restaurant next door, and he was telling me that by what was on the roof, that the bakery wasn't going to be a bakery. He said because there wasn't going to be able to have the smoke and meet the requirements of a bakery. So I was questioning Jennifer McDonald and some of the people, and I never could get a straight answer. Those kind of things, that bakery never baked one piece of bread. And the people in there did all kinds of renovations and then disappeared. And I never got a final accounting, nothing. That type of independent EDA needs to be gone. That when, especially somebody who's on the town council or board of sewer, if we ask some questions, we need to get answers.
I think that type of instance emphasizes the importance that it behooves everyone around this table to pay attention, and when there's a question on an economic development project, to pursue it, and if one person doesn't give you the answer, come to the rest of the board and we will get it for you.
Well, I can answer that, and I'm trying to be nice about this in a way, but the EDA became untouchable. Point blank. It became untouchable. I know we're here now because of what's happened, but into the future, that untouchable effect needs to never happen again.
We agree.
That's correct. That's exactly right. That's why we need to be basic and not going into these other side projects where the EDA does not specifically need to be. We can facilitate rather than being the direct provider.
Yeah, and it's also not fair to constituents and people who live in Warren County when they ask us questions, and I think they're also asking EDA people, and they don't get answers. You know, I know there's a middle ground somewhere when a business is doing something, they need some secrecy, but there is also some transparency, but also some transparency and honesty that if they're giving grant money to a business, say to make a bakery, and then that we have questions because we don't see it kind of going as it should, we need to have immediate feedback so that we feel secure and what's being done. I mean, there's numerous examples like that. I just picked that one out because it was right 2 doors down from my office at the time.
And those are what we're focused on preventing in the future.
I think it's a matter of having the right policies and procedures in place. You know, we have checks and balances on our finances to make sure that I don't go hog wild and take off with a bunch of
And I still have
money.
never seen anything, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I was told there was grant money given to this person who did the renovations. I mean, she never did a thing. Just nothing ever happened.
If you send it to us at the office tomorrow, we'll get somebody to see if we can track it
I'd
down.
love to get answers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify, it wasn't a grant, it was a micro enterprise loan of $10,000 that was given to the bakery. She did make, I think, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 payments toward the loan, and then moved to Georgia, and the bakery did never open, but it was never a grant. It was a micro enterprise loan. But we can give you more information on the project and on the loan documents.
And a lesson to be learned. If you have a question, bring it up to the group, not by yourself, because there's more voices than one. So if you had a question, Tom, you should have brought it up to the board or a group.
That
so that
was
we
before I
could-
was on board, before I was on
Well,
board.
then when you were on council, you could have brought it up while you were on council to the council that you had a concern, and that could have been addressed, instead of letting it go this way, and then bringing it up 3 years
Beth brought it
later.
up to the group. Nobody listened to her. She was on council. Y'all ignored her.
I went to board of
We're
supervisors.
not going to call out from the audience.
Not when you don't
Because I
want to hear
asked
it.
you directly.
We want
It's not
justice.
part of the meeting.
We want justice.
So, Mr. Sayer, if I can speak up, you know, with permission of the chair, with the EDA chair, we are developing a project charter template. And this has basically become, it's really a living, breathing organism, so to speak, where when a client or a business comes to here, this is, for lack of better words, the Bible of the project. Okay, this details who the individual is, who the company is, who's behind it, where the financing is coming from, where their timeline is from, who are the key players, who's associated with it from the town council, the board of supervisors, any other county department, or any other county department, excuse me, any type of, what the industry may be, whether it's staffing, the payroll, tapestry, machinery and equipment, needed proffers, off-site improvements, community impact. Who are the community stakeholders involved in that? This is the draft copy. This is something that we, the board, have been working on, and this will be included with all of the projects that you're speaking of right now. So we will be able to have a document that we can reference in the past. So in a situation like this arises, and ideally it does not arise again, but we can go back here and we can say, oh, they made a change, or oh, they've made their business plan has changed, or oh, they're stalled in zoning, or whatever the case may be. So this is something that I live and die by in my professional business. This is something that we're instituting in the EDA to make sure that these businesses are being handled in the appropriate fashion. I'd be more than happy to provide a copy of this to you this evening if you like.
Would it be possible to have that on the EDA website so anybody in the public that would want to see it can see it?
This is a draft version that we have right now, so absolutely, as the final versions are being rolled out, this information will be made public. This is something that we do roll out in our monthly meetings. We do bring out our charters, we do bring out our RACs, and we do bring out our committee formations. Something like this will be included as it's developed with input from the rest of the members. That's all I have on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I have a list of EDA properties from what we got earlier in the spring of this year. And the numbers on this sheet don't match the numbers on this sheet. Some of these just include land values and not the total values that are there. I just wanted to just find out who the point of contact is, because obviously we don't have time to look at all of this.
I'd be glad to work with you on that. My colleague Gretchen Henderson has put a lot of effort into that list. It's just going to depend on how the properties were valued. That's one of the three things on our audit that needs a lot of adjustments is property valuations from the past. We're going to have those reassessed in order to come up with a more accurate balance sheet, which is one of the things that the accountants are working on, along with the proposed adjusted journal entries for the assets, liability, and capital, and in a review of the micro loans. So I'm more than glad to work with you on that and answer your questions.
Thank you.
Gene?
Mr. Chairman, this is for probably Mr. Daly. The list of properties that you have given to us is 25 that I see here on this list. How many of these properties has a lien against them that they're not able to be sold until that lien is cleared off of the record? I understand you said you had $40 million worth of debt. Does that mean that most of these properties are under some type of lien agreement with the banks or
Yes, sir.
financial institutions?
Without identifying any specific property, most of all the properties on our list have some type of bank note against them that we need to confirm with the bank when we sell the property, etc. Very, very little that we own outside of the bank.
Okay. The question that I referred to a while ago, I just was asking now. The property that the county bought about a year and a half ago, the warehousing that y'all paid $5 million plus for, and you're paying a payment of $42,000 a month or whatever, I'm not sure the figures. What is your plan with that piece of real estate? Is the county going to turn it back over to the EDA? Or are y'all going to sell it or rent it? Or can you give me some type of idea of what that piece of real estate will be used for?
My gut feeling is sell it. That's my gut feeling.
So the board will sell it under their auspice, or will it go
It would
back
go
to
through
the
the
EDA?
EDA because they'd be bringing the client in. So it'd be handled through them. Dan?
The EDA actually owns the property, the county just pays the debt service on it. So basically, when we do get a prospect, we have, it is advertised to the EDP, and we have already entertained probably 10 different prospects for the property. And I imagine we'll work with the board of supervisors in discussing that prospect with them. But Doug Parsons is actively marketing the property. And so we should have, hopefully we should have a purchaser for that property in the near future.
but the property is actually owned by the county.
No, it's owned by the EDA.
Then why is the EDA paying the loan instead of the
The
taxpayer?
county's paying the loan.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Why do we do that?
Because the Board of Supervisors passed a resolution agreeing to pay the debt service on the property.
Well,
That's why they need to go.
Will the EDA reimburse the county and the taxpayers for that as soon as they get solvent in the future?
Basically, we are seeking to sell the property for the outstanding principal balance, which would then, if there's any amount over the principal balance that's paid for the property, I imagine we may consider reimbursing the county for all the debt service that they paid at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. That's all.
Mr. Chairman, if I can have a follow-up to that question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So this opens up a very interesting line of thought. And I'm not certain it's been thoroughly considered. So it's my understanding that in 1991, a resolution was passed whereby the town and the county passed this resolution and stipulated that the county would be getting 50% of assets above operational expenses for the EDA, and if there's any profits, and the town would be getting 50%. It used to be the town and county would be the ones making decisions as it relates to assets of the EDA. That's how it used to be. At some point after 2000, the EDA became, I guess, self-sustaining, and the EDA became a profit generator and started buying a lot of assets and making profit, and none of those profits were distributed back to town taxpayers, to my knowledge, and I'm fairly accurate of that. In the reform committee, that needs to be considered, and when when people thought I was crazy or thought I had an axe to grind, and I did not. I truly, and I still do not. But, when you consider the amount of money that might be owed to the town government, and when you consider the amount of monies that might be owed to the county government, I don't believe the EDA is solvent. And I don't know what the future of the EDA looks like. And through the discussions that we're having tonight, and through the discussions I hope we have in the future, along with the reform committee, that really needs to be looked into. Because now I guess the town council could vote to not accept the monies that's owed to them, but I'd be surprised by that. So, when you start talking about an asset that's going to be sold, money's going back to the county, I think money should be coming back to the town as well. So I just wanted to go on the record with that and not let that slide. So as it relates to the relationship between the EDA and the county, I'm pretty clear on what that relationship is. It's clear that now the county is the fiscal agent. I think that's the term that's being used. I don't know how that, I still question the legality of that when you have one corporate entity being the fiscal agent of another corporate entity. I'm not familiar with that process or that setup. But regardless, so I'm clear on the relationship between the EDA and the county and the EDA, but I'll tell you what I'm not clear with, and we really need to resolve it tonight, but I'm not clear what the relationship is between the EDA and the town and the EDA. I think in the past, there was the town government would fund 28% of an operational line item. It was more of a stipend than it was anything else. It wasn't full funding. Well, at one point it was probably full funding. As the years went on, and Archie and Tony, some of the people that have been around longer, I don't think, whatever amount of money that were being contributed was funding full operations. And I think in 2009 or 2005, the town government decided to stop funding that portion. And I believe, I think it was a mistake for the mere fact that it gave the perception to both the EDA and the county that the town has no involvement with the Economic Development Authority. And so we don't have to discuss it tonight. I'm happy to discuss it tonight, but I think it'd be beneficial to understand what role is the town government going to have with the EDA. Bill Seelock says it, has said it in 2 different meetings, and I'm going to steal, if you don't mind me to paraphrase your comments, where is the town government in the EDA's priorities? And so I think that'd be good to discuss. We don't have to do it tonight, maybe the reform committee, but I think that'd be whether decisions are being jointly made about assets, or are assets going to be bought and sold independently by the EDA. Frequently what's been happening is the EDA goes to the county and gets blessing to do whatever they do, and they do. So I think the town government would like to know in the future, how's that working relationship? What's that procedure maybe, or what's the policy going to be? Or maybe you already have something that you can say tonight.
I think it takes a longer discussion than we have tonight, sir. But I don't think we know, from the EDA's perspective, what role the town wants to play in regard to the EDA. A year ago, I was asking somebody from the town about economic development, and well, we leave that to the county. And so that was the perception that I personally received, was that the county was the leader, if you will, on the EDA activities. And when somebody asked me to consider coming on the EDA as a member, they were from the county, not from the town.
Right.
And so that just left me that. So I think it's a longer discussion of what role does the town want to have with the EDA, and that involves the county also, how the two relate.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's very well said. Anyone else on that topic? I have one other follow-up. Is there one more follow-up? One other question. Doug Parsons. So I'm fairly familiar with the VEDP and the role that the Virginia Economic Development Partnership has with local EDAs and vice versa. In your economic development efforts, what proactive roles or role does the EDA in Warren County EDA plan to do, as opposed to just sitting back and waiting for the VEDP to hand you leads?
Well, there's a few things. First of all, you may have heard me talk about the VEDP site characterization process. And what that is that's an analysis by the State Development Office of all sites throughout Virginia over 25 acres, 25 contiguous acres. And they've done that analysis, and they've done it with our sites here in Warren County and Front Royal. And so what they're going to do is they're going to assign a rating to each site around the state, and there's hundreds of them, obviously. And we'll get a tier rating on our sites, and it'll be somewhere between 0 and 5. The goal is to get your sites to a level 4 or a level 5 to be as competitive as possible with other sites around the state and around the country. And there's a process that they've identified for that, and there are certain items that they look for to increase those tier ratings. Phase 1 environmentals, geotechnical reports with soil borings, ALTA surveys with meets and bounds, and so forth. And the more of these things that we have for each of our properties, then the more often those properties are going to come to the forefront with any given prospect that the state gets. The state has a variety of marketing efforts that local economic development authorities can take part in, conventions and trade shows around the country and around the world. We're very fortunate, and I know everyone's tired of hearing me drone on about how great the Virginia Inland Port is, but it really is an incredible asset. And I've been working with them to try to identify some marketing opportunities, because those are going to be more targeted for the port down at Norfolk and Newport News, but also for our inland port. And I think that that's an opportunity where we can really focus our efforts on something that would have a better chance of ending up in a success for us. So there's a variety of things that we can do with them, and I'm fortunate that I have a good relationship with the folks at BEDP. Worked there for 4.5 years, so I have a good understanding of how they work, the people there, and we have a good working relationship. So I'm hoping that'll certainly be an asset going forward.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I comment as well?
Yes.
I would say that EDA's proaction, other than VEDP, in past years is very little. You look at the website, it's 5 years old. You look at the strategic plan, 2013. I can go on of things that didn't get done, that needed to be done. And we're in the process of doing a lot of those things, both to better communicate to the businesses that we target, to create lists of industries that we can target and go after. And it takes time to do those things, where I'm going out to county and town departments to talk with them about how we present a unified message and to get the details that are going to make our story vibrant, unique. And those are all things that go out after it. But to answer your question honestly, in recent years, there hasn't been a lot of it, but that's going to change.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone else have anything?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question for Mr. Parsons and Mr. Taylor, please. It's my understanding that taxpayer funds were appropriated during closed session. What steps are you guys taking to make sure this never happens again?
That's a question for me, sir. I know Virginia law on that, and that will not happen while I'm on that board.
Charges going to be brought against people who
I cannot speak to any of the criminal issues, the cases. That's totally up to them. What is done at the courthouse, I don't have any influence there, but it will not happen at our board.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything? If not, I have
Mr.
one.
Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
I address some of the things, and I don't want to delay it too long, but as far as the ball drive is concerned, we were approached by the EDA, and we had a model, and that was the old North American Housing. I think that property become vacant. The former director came to us and said that she had a prospect, maybe she got it through the VEDP, but they were willing to come in and lease the property, pay the taxes for a 3-year period. And at the end of that point, they bought the property, and they are a viable economic project that we can point to. So we use that as the model. And when it was explained to us at that time, supposedly there was another company that was lined up to come in there and pay either a portion or all of that. So that was part of the reason we went forward with that. No, we did not contact the town. But by the same token, I don't believe the county had any input or contact when the town and the EDA went together on the afternoon, on the PD, and those things too. We had projects of our own that came off those books. In the past, I believe that, well, I know that first off, most viable sites for economic development are located in the town, between Abtex and Happy Creek. And what happens in the town stays in the town. No, I'm just kidding. What happens in the town benefits the county tremendously. And in the past, when we needed to work together, it was usually putting together some type of incentive package. And that goes back to the old 80-20, depending on where it's located. So that's how that came about. But by all means, and I think that's what's going to happen with the communications committee and the EDA board as a whole, and they should, and I think they will, if there's something going on that the town's asking the EDA to do, we should get a heads up and vice versa. So I think that'll go forward. And I think Mr. Murray's getting ready to go to the next agenda item, but if I may, if there's no other comments on this, I would like to go back to what I think was said in some of the opening remarks. Just briefly, as far as the reform committee, when is that scheduled to meet again? Does anybody know?
September 12th.
September 12th. Okay. What I would suggest, which was already suggested, was that an EDA board member be put on that committee. I know it gives an even number. However, the one thing is too, Mr. Whitten, I guess that's going to be your farewell tour on the 12th, but he will no longer be a member on that committee. So it knocks it back down to 6. The county is looking into getting at least an interim county attorney and putting out for RFPs to fill that slot. And I think that the EDA is doing the same thing to get their own. So it just seems like to me, because right now you've got an elected official, administrator for both the town and the county. And I believe initially, Mr. Speaker, you'd want to put one of the board members on, then there was a last minute change. But I would certainly think if he's amenable to it, that in addition to Mr. Parsons, we put Dr. Daly on there too. Because I think he's well versed in EDA matters. I think he's served in several other EDAs. And he also, I think he teaches public finance. So I think he would be a great asset on that committee. Would we be able to go ahead and make that appointment?
Are you making that as a motion?
I haven't yet, that's what I'm asking if
I'll
it's
second
allowable. But I'll make that as a motion to add him to that, and then, like I said, we'll have to figure out the rest of the attorney issues later, but.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, discussion?
Discussion.
You want to discuss first?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I have no objection to that either. My only thought was as far as a voting situation. So I think if you have two EDA, have Mr. Daly on and Mr. Parsons, just which one will be the voting member? If Mr. Daly's going to be the voting member, then that's fine. I think that'd be great. I have no objection to that, so long as you have one voting member.
I was looking at having both meetings, because right now, with what's on there now, they're all full voting members, correct?
Correct.
Okay, well, Mr. Whitten's going, so now it brings it back down to 6. If you were to put Mr. Daly on there, you're back down to 7, because I don't know what and when we'll be able to have, and maybe our attorney could be, standby non-voting member. That's just my thought.
Okay, I raise my objection.
Anyone else? If not,
Maybe if there's a possible amendment to that motion, that the EDA be allowed to pick their member, because I believe that we've had discussions internally as to who might, aside from Mr. Daly, but maybe his duties might not be allowed to participate in that.
I think last meeting there was really no, I think it was put forth with the committee already set up. I mean, I have no problem with that. The only problem is, I don't know when this board's going to meet again or this committee's going to meet again. And I'd like to get somebody on there by the next meeting on the 12th. And I guess you could go ahead and do your amendment and say we agree to put another EDA board member at their discretion.
Well, if I need to narrow it down, I'd like to make an amendment that it's either Mr. Baylor or Mr. Brown that's going to serve for the EDA capacity.
What was that? You want to do what?
I'd say either Mr. Daly, Dr. Daly, or Mr. Brown serve in that capacity as the contributing board member on that committee. One or the other.
We need to vote, or you guys can hash it out.
actually, the EDA should discuss it amongst themselves and come up with who the individual is going to be.
We have a meeting on the 10th, and we can select somebody at that time to represent EDA at the meeting.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
Or would you like to go to executive session? Work it out now, resolve it, so it's one less thing to be done on the list.
I wouldn't think that would be necessary. I mean, it's not going to be that big of a discussion, and I don't think we need a break.
Okay.
Just my opinion. I would say go ahead and do the amendment that the EDA puts another member as a voting member on there, and it'll be left up to the discretion to the EDA to make that decision on the 10th.
Okay.
Chairman, point of discussion on the amendment. Is there a second on the amendment?
Yeah, I'm second.
Discussion. Yeah, I have no problem with the amendment of choosing which one, but I do plan to amend the main motion after this first amendment is voted.
Call the question.
We have a roll call, please.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, we're voting on the amendment.
Okay.
I do have a question. We have an amendment made by a member of the EDA board, although my instructions are to do a roll call and votes by Board of Supervisor and Council. And that's the rules of our joint meeting that were voted on at our initial meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I would carry the amendment of the gentleman to either have Mr. Daly or Mr. Brown, I believe you said. Is there a second?
At the EDA's
At the
discretion.
EDA's discretion.
Second.
All right, Mr. Sayer, was that you? Thank you, sir.
Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear on the intent. Is your intent to have only those two individuals determined, or do you want the EDA board to just pick the person?
The first intent was to have either one of those, but if it's left up to the discretion of the EDA board to select their member, I'm certainly fine with that amendment as well. I just do not want to be, I don't want a vote to occur this evening for one specific individual. I'd like the EDA board to decide on who's going to be representing this organization on that particular.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, will you allow me to rescind my amendment and carry that amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Tom. Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend the main motion that if there's two EDA members on the committee, that only one gets to carry a vote.
Second.
Call the question.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to mention that I've heard some people have been calling for like a citizens committee, and for a reform committee, be thinking about that, how maybe a citizens committee could work in conjunction with the reform committee.
I think we need a citizens committee down the road. I think we need to get the horse in front of the cart and know the direction we're going before we do that. I don't think we're at the point of being able to give somebody guidance in that direction. We need to get that horse in front of the cart right now.
Chairman, we're ready to move on to action items?
Point of order, please.
Yes.
The last thing we voted on, I thought that was just your amendment. So I don't know if that went back to the original motion or not.
I think you're right. Let's do the main motion.
Where are we?
We have a motion in a second. Tom called for.
We have to vote on the main.
Main motion is to select, is to add an EDA board member.
I think we approved that at their
Yes.
discretion. And then you had the motion just voted on that the EDA board members only had one vote. So now the main motion would be there. And I guess the only question would be too, like I said, now you're back to six? You're back to six, and then what are you doing at time? Again, that's going back to the amended motion, but that's just a thought.
So basically, we would rescind the main motion at this point, because the amendment's already accepted. So we could vote on the main motion and deny it.
I thought you amended the main motion.
I did. We amended the main motion to allow.
Okay, so you amended the motion, you didn't propose an amendment.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, somebody state the motion for clarity.
May I?
Yes.
The motion, as I understand it, is to add either myself or Mr. Brown as a member of the EDA board to the reform committee, and that either one of us or Mr. Parsons would be casting a vote, and there would only be one vote. That's what I think I heard.
Say to me, sitting there listening, that the easiest thing on the amendment should have been one of you be the alternate.
And that's fine.
Either or should have been the alternate. If you couldn't make the meeting, then the alternate would go and you'd have a voting right. That's the,
And that, we can work that out, sir. We can see that there's one member between us at the meeting and that there was one vote between us and Mr. Parsons. We can take care of that.
that would have simplified the whole thing.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it seems if you made Mr. Parsons an ex officio member, and then either of these could have one vote, that would solve your problems.
Are you making that as,
I'm not in a position to make it. I don't think.
that's true?
Okay, yes, I make that as a motion.
I'll second that.
Well, that's it. You can't make a motion.
He can't make a motion.
No, I didn't think so, no.
No, I wanted 3 groups on, but it's 2.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to belabor this point. I think we have the intent already resolved. So we have the intent resolved, Mr. Chairman. There was an amendment. There was a second amendment. Now we need to do is just deny the main motion and the amendments carried. Do you agree, Mr. Carter?
Sure.
Okay, all in favor
Of the main motion.
of the main motion?
Vote no. Okay?
That's right.
Or vote no.
If you're in favor of the main motion,
We've
vote
already
no.
voted on the amendment.
Yeah.
So the amendment,
If we keep this up, we'll have breakfast shortly.
well, maybe we can.
All in favor of the main motion?
Ask
Yeah,
one of the
All
attorneys.
opposed?
That's what he said. All opposed are a yes on what's being presented. Correct?
Yeah, so if I can help, Mr. Chairman, the main motion is basically null and void, so we're going to vote no for the main motion. And the EDA board will have a representative at their selection,
At your selection.
and they will have one vote. Is that right, Mr.?
Just had a question, Mr. Chairman. I know the EDAs don't have separate counsel, counties don't have separate counsel. So I'm not sure if you want to have the county's counsel at the reform committee after I'm gone, or if you want the EDA's counsel at the reform committee after I'm gone. Because maybe that's something you may just need to decide. I'm not sure when this committee's going to meet again, but you may need to think about that.
Yeah, we can handle that in the second motion. So we can't get through the first one. Do you agree, Mr. Napier, that all we need to do is deny the main motion? And that's the
Let me
simplest
get
way.
through this motion first.
But that's the simplest way to handle it. Deny this main motion. The amendment's passed. Okay. So you want to do the roll call, or do you want to say all those in favor?
All in favor
Of the main
of the
motion?
main motion that was originally made
By Mr. Carter? No.
by Mr. Carter?
No.
No. Any yeas? Passed.
All right, so we're good on that. So now your question, Mr. Whitten, is do you want the county EDA, or the, I'll leave that up to the county's discretion, whichever they prefer. I don't know that.
If you want the county attorney to be your representative of the reform committee.
I think we should.
We should.
Attorney.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I moved to be the county attorney.
Yes. Okay.
Is that Mr. Mitchell? Or the new person that you're hiring?
No,
We'll know at this point.
We've advertised.
I have no objection to that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Who made the motion?
Tom made the
I'll
motion.
second that.
I've already seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Let's move on. We're in the action items, or do we want to do the action items?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I could probably speed this along. Mr. Chairman, what we did was we went through the minutes and extracted the action items. Thank you, Ms. Berry, for making that really clear. I think that was very helpful. The first action item was memo to the EDA from the town and county pertaining to debt services, dates, and amounts. I think we're in the process of gathering all that, right? I mean, that's what tonight is one step, and there's going to be other documents coming shortly. There is no.
If there's anything specific that somebody sees after they've had a chance to review this that we're looking for, make sure we let Mr. Parsons know.
Okay. So for the minutes, 6A is still pending. That'd be carried over to the next meeting as an action item. 6B, obtain a copy of the insurance policy. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, is that all right for me to keep moving?
Yes.
Obtain a copy of the insurance policies from attorney. Want to thank Mr. Whitten and the county. We received those copies probably within, 48 hours after our last meeting. So I want to thank you for that. That's very helpful. The town is looking into it. We've turned it over to appropriate people. So that item can be resolved. That's complete. Number C, obtain a copy of the EDA list within 30 days. That's part of the same thing that Mr. Daly and Mr. Parsons. That's still pending.
That should be in the packet of materials you have this evening,
I
sir.
was gonna say, one, and that should be in the packet.
So that is complete.
That should
is
be complete.
You just haven't had time to review it.
The only thing is, if I may, I thought Ms. Thompson made some comment that they didn't match up for some of
Catch up.
the
So
She's
we'll
previous
resolve
things.
those issues, absolutely.
Yes.
I'm glad to work to help reconcile the list that we have. And then if there's any additional information about the properties that you want to see that isn't represented here, we can certainly do our best to add that.
The amounts owed on those properties. The
Yep.
amounts owed on those properties should be added to that chart. Thank you.
Thank you. Obtain unredacted Cherry Becker report. We have not received that. Mr. Witt, do you have an update on that?
I do. I talked to the EDA's counsel, Sands Anderson, and that would fall under work product privilege, attorney-client privilege, so we will not be able to provide an unredacted copy of the report. We have provided a redacted copy of the report that was also provided to the grand jury.
Does the EDA have the authority to tell Sands Anderson to waive that work product report stipulation?
We do have the authority. I would have to talk to the EDA board whether I would advise them to do that. Because if you waive attorney-client privilege, then we would have to provide the unredacted report to all the defendants' legal counsel in the case. So that could compromise the EDA's position. So that is why Sands Anderson recommended against turning over the unredacted report.
Mr. Napier, question for you. If the EDA chose to give the unredacted report to waive privilege only for the town government, are they allowed to waive it only for the town government, or if they waived it, would that require the EDA to distribute it to everyone involved in the civil litigation?
I'll have to look at that, but since the EDA and the town would have a commonality of interest, I question whether they would have to waive it to all the defendants. I'll look into that.
Okay, the second question is, considering that we are involved in a civil suit against the EDA, I've been involved in various legal actions, and it's very common for the two attorneys to find common ground prior to litigation, trying to resolve issues. Would it be possible for the EDA to waive attorney-client privilege to turn over the Cherry Becker unredacted report through that civil litigation process, which would, in essence, protect, if there is a concern about turning over the report to other civil litigants, could it be done through that civil process alone and allow that to remain more confidential, I guess?
I think it could. I think the court could order its being turned over to the town under terms so that the town could not release it to unauthorized people.
Okay, thank you for that.
I agree, if we got a court order, that memorialized those terms, I would be fine with that.
Okay.
But, that's something and perhaps, I know you have the demur hearing on September 11th, perhaps you could also have a motion regarding this report that you're hearing.
Okay, so that's still pending, and Mr. Napier, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if you're successful in that effort, would you share it with the EDA board? Because the board has never seen an unredacted copy.
That'd be left up to your attorney, Mr. Davis.
Mr. Seaver? I don't know, to me, it almost comes under item 7C too, because we talked about having, I guess, EDA's counsel and.
Yeah, that's what I was
counsel
going
do
to,
that.
I'll
So
mention that to Doug.
I would think that would be for them to schedule a conference call and discuss that issue as if you have down there to strategize, but also
Correct.
to these other legal issues too. I think that would be the best scenario.
That's a different legal counsel.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, may I move on?
Moving right along.
MOU from the town pertaining to the Afton Inn within 30 days. I guess I will, the town has no action specifically as it relates to the Afton Inn. We did have an executive session discussion last night. We've relayed information to Mr. Parsons, and so we are awaiting some input from Mr. Parsons as it relates to the Afton Inn. But we are, I'll just go on the record once again, we're very motivated to see activity take place, and frankly, we're very optimistic that something's going to happen in the very near future. So we can keep that on as a pending item.
Next is scheduling our upcoming meetings.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I know that several council members, and this is, I apologize to council, and if you guys think differently, I'm happy to. I know several council members have approached me about having a town hall meeting with citizens, to give citizens an opportunity to ask questions. I was going to ask and try to coordinate that with the EDA board, and maybe the Board of Supervisors may want to participate. At some point, I think we need to have, maybe we're not there today, maybe it'll be 2 weeks, 30 days, but at some point, I think it's important for the community to have an opportunity to ask their questions and for our bodies to actually answer the questions. I know frequently during the public presentation portion of meetings, the standard has been, and I understand why, citizens, it's an opportunity for citizens to petition our bodies. However, they don't really get any answers at those meetings or getting real follow-up. That's not accurate. They do get follow-up, but I think it'd be an opportunity to have a town hall meeting. So I think the town, I'm going to discuss it with the council members in further detail, and maybe perhaps put it on a work session, Joe, to find out their level of interest. Maybe the EDA, you guys could determine your level of interest as well in the county, and see if in the near future we can try to get something scheduled for a citizen town hall. As it relates to this meeting, I don't know about you, I found this very productive. I think this is, it's an hour and a half of our life, but I think is very, very necessary and very important. I'm happy to have, considering the state of affairs we have with the EDA, I'm happy to have another joint meeting with the EDA. Council, how do you feel? Do you agree? Mr. Murray, how's the supervisors feel? You guys want to have another meeting in 45 days or something, a little later, further out? Give us
a little further out.
Get the reform committee time to meet and do their business.
So we have some information to work with.
Okay. Should we try to set a date now, or what's your preference?
I'm sorry, you're talking about like the 1st of October? Or even farther than the middle of October?
I was thinking the middle of October.
Okay.
Somewhere around the 16th.
Yeah, we can't make it the 15th, because that's when we
No,
have
we
a
don't.
regular meeting. And I don't know if we need to keep it on Tuesdays or Thursdays.
It doesn't matter to me.
Don't know.
Would it be possible to send out with specific dates or a list of dates, Ms. Berry could send that out to everybody and kind of choose, or
Sure, happy to do that.
just suggestion?
Mr. Chairman, the VML meeting is October the 6th through the 8th. So those dates should be blocked out.
I was gonna move we do on the 6th. That's fine. No, like I said, I think probably, like I said, sometime after that week, if they want to send out something.
Okay, so we're looking at between the week of the 14th and the 28th.
Right.
Okay. Ms. Berry, did you get that? Thank you.
Probably come to a decision now, don't you think?
The mayor's going to meet with his council, and we'll bring it up in our work session to see what's compatible for dates. And then we can work from there rather than schedule a meeting, cancel a meeting, reschedule a meeting. That only adds to confusion. Let's lock it down once and for all.
The 16th is open, looks like it's open for us.
What day is it?
This Wednesday, the 16th.
Wednesday, the 16th.
So maybe if the EDA could look at your board members, and so I think that'd be maybe the preferred date, but
You talking about October?
yes, ma'am.
Are you looking at a Tuesday?
It's a Wednesday.
October 16th is a Wednesday.
October.
Oh, I'm looking at the right.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we move on to the next item.
Yes.
Upcoming meeting, I think we can take off that 7B. I believe they already met once, Mr. Chairman, and I think there's some I would say discrepancy, but there's still some negotiating as it relates to one of the terms. So that Mr. Waltz has direction from town council, so I believe we're going to be setting up a meeting in the near future. But again, the first meeting, that's it's good stuff. I mean, the report back that we got from staff was that it was a very productive meeting, so we want to thank the EDA representatives and the county representatives. Next item, Mr. Chairman, is the meeting with the legal counsel, town, county, EDA. Do you have, Mr. Napier, if you guys set a date for that meeting that you're aware of?
We haven't, but I would like to as soon as possible.
Okay, can you get with Mr. Whitten?
Well, actually,
And Sands Anderson.
whoever it's going to be, because Mr. Whitten is in the twilight. He's within about 2 weeks of leaving.
And then you can do next week when he leaves.
Yeah, I'll be glad to meet with the attorney in the lawsuit. If that's okay.
The attorney in the lawsuit, sir?
The attorney for the, representing the EDA in the lawsuit and also.
Which suit? I'm not trying to be smart, sir, but which lawyer do you want to meet with?
Lawsuit representing the EDA that the town has filed. All three attorneys. However you want to do it.
So you want to meet with the attorney who's representing the EDA in the town's suit?
Right. That attorney and Sands Anderson, whoever you want to meet, I'll be glad to meet with them.
It is not Sands Anderson, but Mr. Whitten can talk to that attorney and see what we can do. Because I don't know the procedure there. Just want to clarify which case we're talking
Yeah,
about.
there's an attorney from Timberlake Smith and another attorney from Sands Anderson. I will be glad to meet with either or both.
Okay. And to reiterate the mission, Mr. Daly, you may not recall, the mission of this meeting, of the joint meeting with the attorneys, is to try to figure out legal strategy and where there's commonality with regards to effort between the town and the county for any additional third-party entities that we may want to be pursuing that are not currently part of the civil suits. So rather than the EDA, rather than the town and county bodies trying to determine that, it was determined at the last meeting to get the attorneys together, let them sit down and figure out where there was commonality, where there were conflicts of interest, how to resolve conflicts of interest. If there is commonality, who's going to pay what. So I think that was, who's going to represent whom. So I think that was the purpose of that joint legal meeting. Is that accurate, Mr. Chairman? fair
We
assessment?
can always do a conference call with the Sands Andersons in Richmond and Timberlake.
Yeah, whatever you guys decide.
So it might be more productive. Doug and I could be in the same office, but the other attorneys can be just.
Yeah, I think the sooner we can get that on the books, I think the better, because I see a list here of the packet that was given that, and considering some of the collateralized assets, I know I've had conversations with Mr. Napier, and we're very interested on some matters.
Mr. Teacher, Mr. Whitten, is the judge set at the Murr hearing yet?
For which case? Which case?
The case, Sands Anderson case.
No. There is a demurrer hearing set for the town's case versus the EDA for September 11th, correct? 12th at 9 a.m. But the case of EDA versus the 9 different defendants, there hasn't been a demurrer hearing set yet. We're working with Judge Albertson on setting a date.
So they can work that out. The attorneys can work it out between themselves, make the necessary contacts and report back.
Mr. Whitten, Mr. Napier, do you think you can have that meeting by next Friday, next week?
I would hope so.
Mr. Whitten? Okay, thank you.
Do we need to go into executive session? I don't see a reason to.
I don't see a reason. I move to adjourn.
Well,
Oh, sorry.
I was ready to say, with the EDA, it's not just recruiting businesses. Now you wore uniform like I did. Recruiting was easy, retention was hard. We need to put as much effort into supporting and sustaining the businesses that are here for growth and stability as we will put in chasing a new business. We got to keep that on the top of our mind, that is extremely important. We need to do that. Other than that, you made a motion to adjourn. Was there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.